I am in the center and not on the side like I usually am. And my foot is asleep. We're having so much fun right now. Hello and welcome to Strim. Ooh. I am still multi-streaming and I hope everything's okay on the YouTube end. I'm doing my best. I might still be a little bit iffy. But it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Let me get the book. There we go. There's the book. I'm just reading. What could go wrong? Where's wood? Where's wood? I don't have wood near me. I'm knocking on metal. Metal has been knocked. I hate every single word that just came out of my mouth. Anyway, I have water. I've started sooner than I thought I would because I was getting antsy. Anyway, water, and now it's time for reading. The Sea Cellar. At the edge of a great wood, on the shore of an inland sea, is a house where daughters go to die. But they do in lace and satin with wedding rings on their fingers, so nobody dares complain. In that house lives a man, some say, others say a monster, and a few claim it's a woman who lives there. Year after year, throwing out offers of good fortune to hook the desperate parents of unwed girls by the mouth. And for every bride thus caught, traded for her weight in wealth, or a business contract, or a fleet of ships, there are those who come after her. The bride's secret sweethearts, grieving mothers, intrepid sisters and brothers prowl around the house at night, their footprints marking the sand, their horses breaking the branches, but none can find their way in without the house's leave. Though they can see the door right there, hung invitingly ajar, and the torches lit beside it, they could walk a day and night by torchlight and never get closer. It's on this threshold, weary and defeated, that the bride's lost loved ones stop, drop their sorrowful heads, and weep. Sometimes, over the sound of their own grieving, they hear something else, a distant rush and fall, an endless shush as one of 1,000 men and women whispering, not quite the water, not quite the woods, but something deeper, older, the voice perhaps that taught the sea to sing. Once this sound curls inside their ears, it will follow them to their final hour. Alba was 14 when her sister became a bride of the house. The dark dream of her sister's marriage began the night their father came home, as he often did, wet-lipped and stumbling. He pulled his eldest daughter from her bed by one soft arm and looked at her in the firelight, her red hair and frightened eyes, the bloom of her hips. "How old are you?" he said, and answered himself, "Old enough." He'd wept then, molding his hands into a cup to hold her face. That was the most frightening thing to Alba, watching them from beneath the blankets. Their father was rarely cruel, but nor was he ever tender. He paid his daughters as much mind as he would a pair of barn cats. "You were a pretty thing when you were born," he whispered. "Hair red as a rose. Perhaps you'll be luckier than his other brides. At any rate, you'll be rich." It wasn't until he slid a band of blue-green metal onto her finger that his daughters knew what he'd done. Everyone in that part of the world knew what the ring meant, whose suit it represented. Where it sat, the girl's hand grew red with cold, then white. Try as she might, Alba could not warm her shivering sister, nor could she remove the ring. It took some listening at doors for Alba to learn the whole sordid story of how her father traded her sister away. He was sitting at the tavern in his usual spot, arguing over an unpaid bill, when a stranger approached. This man had yellow hair, the uncalloused hands of a prince, and a blue silk top hat embroidered with sea nettles. He settled her father's account with a handful of gold. The two men then drank to each other's health, told tales, played dice, all without the other man revealing his name or his purpose. Over the sodden hours he prized from her father the long history of his failures, one confession after another. Then he told him how he could make them go away. It would be so easy, the stranger said, to make you fortunate. You have 2 daughters, do you not? I need only one of them. Oh no, and he laughed. Not like that. I speak as a proxy for one who wishes to make your daughter a bride. And he revealed on whose behalf he had come, the unseen resident of the house between the woods and the inland sea, which swallowed white-dressed girls and then sighed as if sorry for it. How Alba's father must have paled, his blood run cold, his swimming head clarified, but the hook was already in him. How could he turn down good fortune if all he must give for it was the hand of his daughter? And maybe she would live. Brides went into that house, it was said, and did not come out, one each year, and sometimes more, but it was possible that they lived, that they were cherished and rewarded. A desperate father might imagine many hopeful things while wrangling on the hook. The ring was taken and the promise made. The next morning, a coach stopped in front of their house, dispensing a messenger bearing a large blue box. Alba watched from the window as the messenger, in hooded cape and gloves, knocked on the door. When she reached the front room, her mother was lifting a dress from the box. It was a shapeless thing of aged white silk, stained dark at the cuffs and smelling faintly of storms. You must stop this, Alba said. 14 years old and not yet hardened to the ways of the world. Who am I to stop what's already in motion? Her mother spat on the floor. I curse the one who sent this. I curse your father. As for your poor sister. By then she was crying too hard to speak. The messenger leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets. What will happen to her? Alba demanded. Who is the bridegroom? She has an hour, he replied. I won't wait. Alba found her sister in bed beneath the blanket and put her mouth close to her older sister's ear. Run, she said, to the woods. I'll gather what you need and follow after. Her sister only sighed and plucked at the ring and turned her face away. Their mother stripped her down and tugged the dress over her head. The family climbed into the carriage, silent as it carried them to a narrow house at a wooded crossroads where a judge answered their knock. They looked in dreadful anticipation for the bridegroom, but even the house's marrying was done by proxy. The one who took the groom's place wore a rippling water-blue coat and a mask that covered all but their lips. The bride shivered and wept and whispered her vows, holding tight to her mother when it was through. Now the proxy told them the bride would travel alone, on horseback, to the house. She was allowed no belongings from her own life. She would wear the wedding dress, and her hair combed down, left unpinned for the breezes to wind themselves through. To her father, the proxy offered congratulations. Go home, they said, and see what fortune has delivered to you. Alba watched with an aching heart as her sister was hefted onto a gray gelding. Courage, she thought. Take courage. The weeping bride clung to the animal's mane, and their mother clung to Alba, and their father clung to the shrieking conviction that he had done the best a man in his situation could do. Alba fixed her eyes on her sister until she was too far gone to be seen. When the family returned to their house, it had been transformed. It was 2 stories. Its 2 stories were 4, its leaky walls snug brick, and every room was filled with riches and beautiful things. Her mother drifted through the house, tears drying. Her father seized up an overflowing coin purse and headed back out the door. Alba walked the house's halls until she found the room that was meant for her, full of books and candles and jewels and dresses, carpeted in the gray of her sister's gilding. She moved past these treasures to the new-looking glass that hung on the wall. To her face in the glass, she made a promise. She would not be so foolish as the other brides' sisters and sweethearts. She would not follow her sister uninvited, only to wander the woods and shore until the house's sighing drove her away. She would bide her time, plan and wait, and discover exactly what became of its brides. Did she decide to become a bride? That's insane. She has more balls than I could ever. Wealth was a balm to her mother's grief. Her father had no grief to remedy, and it did not take him long to imagine he'd earn the riches he traded a daughter for. The pair of them spent their days like they did the coins they hadn't worked for, without heed. Across 2 long years, Alba gathered whispers about the house that stood between the wood and the inland sea. She listened for tales of the brides it had taken before her sister and for rumors of those who came after. Just 2 seasons after her sister's hasty wedding, a young woman from a nearby village was wed and fed to the house, following her father's loss of his fortune at sea. A year after that, the village cobbler abandoned his trade and set himself up in an opulent manner. He had a daughter of 17 who had not been seen since before her father's sudden rise in life. Alba had a guess as to where she'd gone. When Alba turned 16, her mother began to chanter of this eligible young man, and that, without even the grace to blush over the subject of weddings, Alba too thought it time she marry, but her plans took a different shape. She knew how it began: a man deep in his cups, heavy with desperation, a stranger's approach, and a bargain struck. Thus armed, she slipped from the house one night, when she should have been sleeping. She walked to the tavern where her father had promised her sister away, and there watched for a man with yellow hair, smooth hands, and an embroidered blue top hat. Many men came and went beneath her careful scrutiny. It was near dawn when she realized she was being watched, too, by a woman sitting in the farthest corner. Her hair was dark and her skin was rough, and her hat was blue silk and sea nettles. Alba looked back so boldly the woman laughed and moved to join her. "Here you sit in this disreputable place, a lovely young woman alone, and—" She glanced at Alba's hand. "Unwed. How did you fall so far?" "I seek a husband," Alba said shamelessly. "I wish to marry a rich man with a big house and no neighbors near enough to bother us. Do you know of such a bridegroom?" The woman raised a brow. "You'll forgive me for not trusting a rabbit who lays its own head in the trap." "What do you know of my business? What do you know of the house in the wood?" Alba dropped all pretense. "It is the house, then, that the brides marry? Or is there truly a groom inside it? Is he a man or a monster? Or a woman, some say?" She looked Alba over. "It's not a husband you're seeking, is it? It's one of the brides. Your sister, was she? Your friend?" "My sister. Steer clear of the whole dirty business, then. Your family does not need to sell 2 daughters. If it is such a bad business, why have a hand in it?" Alba is knocking people over. I love her. Oh. The woman's mouth tightened. Some reason. Same reason as whoever sold your sister. I'm under a debt. Once I deliver a bride to the house, my debt will be settled. No one who works for the house does it for long, or knows any more than I do. If you wish to be the daughter who saves my neck, so be it. But I'll warn you once more, I believe the darkest things they say about the house are the truest. Let me feed to it a girl a bit more seasoned than you. Your courage can be turned toward better things." Alba held out a hand. "I have waited 2 years to follow my sister, and my answers are all I want for my dowry. If you're not the messenger who will deliver me, I'll wait for the next. But if you'd like to give your conscience a bride who went willingly, make your choice." I love Alba so much. The woman drained her cup, then pulled from her inner pocket a ring that purled with its own watery light. As the ring settled onto Alba's fingers, she felt a pressure like the grasping of a cold hand. In a moment she found she could bear the feeling. Her head steadied and she studied the ring, its dull marine gleam. "May you discover the secrets you seek," the woman said. "May you make a joyful bride." All that night Alba spun in the grip of strange visions, of a house where blue light rippled on the walls and every room opened onto another in an endless twisting chain, and each bowl and basin clattered with wedding rings. She dreamed of orange and yellow creatures swimming through vaulted cathedrals and woke with the taste of salt on her tongue. At breakfast, her mother's eye fell on Alba's new ring. She dropped her teacup to the floor, seized the girl's fingers, and wept. After that, it all happened quickly. The dress was delivered, stained and stinking, by a messenger who gave Alba an hour to prepare. On her sister's wedding day, she'd watched as her mother did up the dress long row coral buttons. Now she had a lady's maid to do the work, with nervous fingers and a crooked hook. Once dressed, she stepped alone into the waiting carriage, lit blue by the sun through its curtains. Waiting for her at the judge's chambers was another masked proxy, wrapped in a familiar coat. Elba watched herself be wed from a distant place, lay scratching at her wrists and throat. The judge's voice traveled many leagues to reach her. At the end, the proxy pressed their mouth to hers, lips warm with beeswax. Then she was lifted onto the back of a gray gelding. Across 2 years, she had held fast to the memories of her sister, as the passage of time tried to steal them away. Now the lost girl seemed to ride behind her. Alba recalled her sister's kitchen scent of tea and thyme, the way she bit the knuckles of her right hand when she was nervous, her habit of sleeping each night with a stitched fox on her pillow, left over from babyhood. If Alba never saw her again, she would always be the age she was when she left. Alba's age. 16. Alba made herself one more promise. The house will take nothing from me that I do not consent to give. The trick, she knew, was to be ready to give everything. Hair sweeping behind her, dress rucked up to her thighs, Alba rode. She heard the house before she saw it. It did whisper, as the story said, or maybe it was the sea at its back that hissed and sighed. There were voices in the whispering that rose and fell like the murmuring of a crowd gathered before a gallows. The house was aglow through the trees, then a shape rising between them, night birds wheeling over it like falling stars. Mine, she thought. The ferocity of the feeling surprised her. But it was true, wasn't it? Even if she were to die tonight, she was married to the master or mistress or monster of this place. Right now, as she rode up to its gates, the house and all its mysteries were hers. Her house was a grand place, white and silent. She admired its clean edges and the great golden eyes of its windows. Then she straightened her neck and rode on, fast through its open gates, pulling her horse to a halt in the empty yard. She slid from the animal's back and led him to the stables behind the house, where a stall stood ready. When the horse had been tended to, Alba walked toward the inland sea. It's breathing, she thought. Its waters moved up and down like the flank of a sleeping animal. It would swallow me. Alba walked through the house's unlocked doors into a vaulted hall. The whispers tugged at her ears, pieces of laughter caught in it like leaves in a river. A chair sat in front of a blazing fire, food and wine beside it on a silver tray. There was a card, too, marked with thin writing, "Please eat. Please drink." It's funny, because I think this is the only girl who's given herself willingly to the house. I hope things end up well for her. Honestly, she deserves the best. Give her a fairy tale, please. Like a nice one, not like Alice 3 times, where she kinda died and then killed everyone. She tried to imagine her gentle sister reading these words, standing in this place, and having the courage to feed herself. The sister had rarely gone farther than their yard, if she could help it. But Alba had traveled a long way to trade her safety for a secret. She sat. The food was hot, the wine was good, the fire stoked high. She drowsed in her chair, her head going hazy, and the spitting of the fire rising up, becoming brighter, sweeter, until something woke her. She thought she'd heard singing through the floor. The house's lights were turned down, blown out. Her tray had been taken away, the fire banked, and a lantern set on the table. Before she could reach for it, the lantern lifted into the air and bobbed off through the dark. Alba followed it up a long staircase, then another, and down a blue carpeted hallway. The chamber the lantern led to her was lit by 100 candles, vases of purple-throated flowers, wobbling in the light. Before her lay the white the wide white stretch of her wedding bed. Elba was brave. She was determined, and she was sure, and she had taken pains to make herself into someone who would not break like her mother, a woman of glass, or bend like her sister, a girl of wax. But she was 16 years old, wed to a stranger who might have been a monster. When she lay down, she kept her boots on. She waited. The candles burned low, and the flowers withered in their heat. When the last flame had extinguished itself, the chamber door opened. The tread across the floor was soft, so quiet she couldn't be certain anyone was there until their breath was in her ear, cool, smelling of salt and stone. It moved over her face and down to the neck of her nightdress, then up again, breathing in her ear, breathing her in. So this was the whim of the one she had married. Alba lay rigid, heart leaping. As a body lay down beside her, she felt the shifting of the bed and waited with crawling skin for the touch that must follow. Nothing happened, and nothing, and nothing. Her body ached from being held so still. Then, a voice. "What is your name?" She sat up, heart pounding with sudden fury. "Do you not even know the names of the girls you wed? How many now? How have you taken into your bed? Do you eat them alive, or do you kill them first? What did you do with my sister?" The pause that followed was so long she thought the voice wanted answer. Her heart was almost quiet again when it did. "That's 4 questions," it said. "I will allow you just one each night. For every question I answer, I'll take something in return. What will you? Tell me what you will take. That depends on the question." Alba thought a long while before she spoke again. "If I were to ask you, what has become of my sister? What must I give you in return for that answer? I will take from you your shadow." Alba tried and failed again to imagine what it might mean to lose your shadow. "I agree to the trade," she said, and ask you again, what has become of my sister?" The voice replied without hesitation. "She came to me as many of them do, bewildered and weeping, expecting cruelty and finding none. I took from her what I take from all my brides, the things they do not need. With what was left I made something better." Before she could protest this riddling response, Elba was struck down by a peeling, sliding sensation, a feeling like a carving knife being taken to all her edges. Not painful, but terrible all the same. When it stopped, she felt lighter, so awfully light, as if her body might lift from the bed and dissipate into steam. Sleep swallowed her like a mouth of a fish. When she woke, there was a tray beside the bed with breakfast on it, and a ring of gold and silver keys. The keys were as long as her forearm and as small as her nail, and every size in between. "The house is yours to explore," said the note propped beside them, "but every room must be opened before you unlock the door that answers to the coral key." Among the hoard of metal keys was one the length of her thumb, made of bony orange coral. She looked at it closely before burying it among its kin. Then she set out to search for traces of her sister. First, she had to learn how to walk without her shadow. The air felt thin. She slid through it like an oiled blade. If she wasn't careful, her body moved too fast, turned too sharp, stumbled. She was breathlessly, perilously light. She opened the house's many doors. A key shaped like a musical note unlocked a room where the instruments played themselves. A key whose teeth had the smoothness of seeds led to a conservatory filled with trees and pots, bearing every kind of fruit. The tiniest keys opened minuscule doors, secret ones hidden in the walls, behind bookshelves under vases. Behind them were rooms too small to crawl inside, every detail perfect, from the pages of books to the petals of flowers. Through the window of a room no wider than her palm, an unfamiliar moon poured its light over a sleeping city. Behind a door whose key was as delicate as a fern frond was a room full of marble statuary. Saints with fishtails, goddesses with serrated teeth, kings wearing whale-bone crowns. In the room's center was a circular pool. Weightless as a wraith, she stepped into it, shattering the statue's solemn reflected eyes. Water sluiced over her body like hands. When she put her head beneath its surface, the whispering that filled the house's room sharpened into a wordless song. She listened to it, looking at a ceiling painted with the aftermath of a shipwreck. A vessel broken on rocks, men littering the water, women with fishtails taking them into their arms to kiss or kill. Honestly, a sleigh. The music's vibing too. As she opened each door, she pulled its key off the ring and left it in the keyhole. She looked at books she'd never heard of and ate from apples that never emptied. Ate from plates that never emptied, not apples, plates. But found no trace of her sister or of the one who spoke to her in the night. When it was dark, the bobbing lantern reappeared to lead her to a long dining table inlaid with abalone. Alba drank the wine, ate the bread, and returned to her chamber, wobbling with the heat of 100 fresh candles. She kicked off her boots and lay on the bed. When the last candle flame had drowned itself, the door opened. Again came the velvet tread across the floor. Against the briny breath running over her skin, no sound, no touch, and when it became too clear to bear, she lifted her own hand to feel for the one hovering over her. At once, they drew it back. "Please," she said, desperate suddenly to see another living face. "May I look at you?" The body settled beside her on the bed. "Is that your question?" "No, I have another. If first you tell me what I lose if it's answered." The speaker's pause was thoughtful. "Tonight I will take your reflection." Alba was silent. There was a time when she believed herself to be fearless. But there were trapdoors inside her, it seemed, beneath which fear could hide. "Yes," she said faintly, "you may have it." The questions that had circled her mind all day seemed, in the voice's presence, like the bright thoughts of a sillier girl. "Tell me this," she said. "Who are you?" "I am mother and murderer," the voice whispered. "I am womb and crypt. I am a road and I am the end of it." No, Alba wanted to say, no more riddles, but the speaker took her reflection. It pulled free like a plant dangling roots, dragging little grief trails through her chest. Within went her memories of her own face, what she looked like, smiling, sorrowing, what parts of it were like her sister's face, or her mother's. She had to run her hands over herself, her chest and belly and hips, to know she existed at all. The panic that came with the trade swept her under, and she slept. In the morning, she searched for her face in the breakfast tray and could not find it. She wondered what use the house could have for her shadow, her reflection. Perhaps there was a room where stolen pieces of the brides were kept. All day she wandered, through tiled rooms and conservatories and a long mirrored arcade. She could hear the singing clearly now. The song was everywhere, in every room, settling into her ears like foam. Words bobbed in it, like boats. They were speaking to her. If only she could learn how to listen. She had fewer keys left now than fingers, the last key, but for the one of coral opened onto a kind of clue, a gallery whose walls were covered in painted women, eyes light or dark, mouths sweet or cunning, faces full of mirth or sorrow or a secret. She might have seen her sister there, in a portrait whose eyes were dark and its lips unsmiling, but she couldn't be sure. In losing her reflection, she'd lost her sister's face, too. In bed that night she waited impatiently. The candles burned down. They burned out. A tread came across the floor. "Before you move any closer," she said, "tell me what I will trade away tonight." The speaker in the dark took their time settling in beside her. "Your voice, but..." Ella's heart strangled like a bird with honeyed wings. "How will I ask you anything after that? You won't." "Our game must come to an end tonight. Choose your final question with care." And Alba asked a question she would soon answer for herself. "What," she said, "is behind the door that opens with the coral key?" The body beside her sighed in satisfaction. "Behind that door is your true wedding bed. Behind it lies answers to all the questions you'll have no voice to ask." Having answered, they took the thing they had claimed. Alba did not know her voice nestled in her chest like a ripe peach until it was taken from her. She did not understand the joys of taking bites from that endless peach every time she uttered a sound. But when it was gone, she felt its absence, perfectly round and aching like an empty stomach. This time, the plundered bride did not allow sleep to take her. She stood, picking up the ring from which the coral key hung, and went in search of its master. She passed iron-bound doors of soft wood, doors with keyholes where they ought to be, and ones that were hidden, disguised as the leering eye of a satyr or the open mouth of a witch. She followed the sound of singing downward, to a slanting cellar door in the house's very depths. Behind it the singing rose higher, keening and victorious. She could hear the words now. The bride slid the final key into its lock. When she opened the door, the light that poured through was blue and silver and green and white. It was black and red in every color she could put a name to. Her bridegroom stretched before her, its breath on every part of her. She would call it by its name if she could speak. The sea. All the brides were waiting, eyes brimming, hands outstretched, legs fused into shining fishtails. One had a face like her very own. She was as light as them now, her heart as eager. Without reflection or shadow or voice, she moved toward their reaching arms, their braided siren song. She knew another voice would be fashioned for her soon, some absolute piece of her, flayed into a thing that crackled and keened, that lured and crawled. The door shut fast behind her. And that, my friends, was the Sea Cellar. Imagine marrying the sea. Personally, sounds like a dream. If you're smart enough, right? Because Elba was very smart. If she was smart enough, she could have kept herself. That's the thing. She was so willing to give herself up, she didn't understand that's what she was doing. And I find that funny. Like, she was so ready to give up everything. She didn't realize truly what she was giving up, and she wasn't ready to give up any of it. You see, the thing you need to do is, although it is the sea, it obviously has, like, some sense of morality as it entertained her. And my thought is that it wants to entertain its brides before it, takes them. Creates a siren out of them, does something. But what you need to do is you need to create a sort of kindred love with it, if that makes sense. It refuses to touch her, but it has mass. She can feel it breathing. She can hear its song. So, what you do is you don't play a game with it. And just full on, just keep living, honestly. If it gives you the keys, it'll be fine, right? And then, because you need to open every single door. Every single door. And once you open every single door, you can get to that door. And personally, I'd stay in the music room because that sounds like a dream. I'd learn to play all kinds of instruments from watching them play themselves, and I find that so cool. And every single room is about the sea, and it's so cool. It's so cool. I'm a nerd. But thank you for stream, and I shall see you all soon. I hope you enjoyed it.